Feltar stood in the docking bay of the human ship, watching strange creatures move around him. They called themselves humans, and they looked nothing like proper warriors. Their skin was soft and pink, without scales or natural armor. Their eyes were small and weak, lacking the enhanced vision of his own people. They seemed fragile, like they might break if someone hit them too hard. The reptilian commander had fought alongside many species in his 30 years of service. He knew the thick-skinned Kethran who could survive plasma blasts. He had seen the quick Zephyrians who moved faster than most eyes could follow. The mind-reading Mindari were useful in battle too. But these humans? Veltar could not understand why the Galactic Federation wanted them as allies. "Commander Veltar?" A voice spoke behind him. He turned to see a human male approaching. The creature was average height with dark hair and calm eyes. "I am Captain Hyunwoo Park. Welcome aboard the Indomitable." Veltar nodded his scaled head. "Captain, I am here to observe your people in combat. The Federation wants to know if humans can fight alongside our forces." "Of course," Hyunwoo replied. His voice was steady, but Veltar noticed something strange in his eyes. A distance, like he was thinking about something far away. "Major Soo-Jin Kim will show you to your quarters and brief you on our mission." A human female joined them. She was smaller than the captain, with short black hair and quick movements. "Welcome, Commander. I hope your stay with us will be educational." Educational. What an odd word choice, Veltar thought. As they walked through the ship's corridors, Veltar observed the human crew. They moved with purpose, but they seemed so vulnerable. Their uniforms were thin fabric that would not stop even the weakest energy weapon. They carried simple projectile guns instead of plasma rifles. Some of them were talking and laughing, making noise that would alert any enemy within hearing distance. "Your people seem very relaxed," Veltar said to Major Soo-Jin. She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "We believe in maintaining morale, Commander. A soldier who cannot find moments of peace will not fight well when the time comes." They passed a group of humans sitting around a table. One of them, a young male, was showing pictures to the others. Veltar heard him talking about his daughter learning to walk. The humans all smiled and made soft sounds of approval. It seemed like a waste of time to Veltar. Warriors should focus on weapons and tactics, not on personal matters. "That is Corporal Tae-hyun," Soo-Jin explained. "He joined us 6 months ago, very dedicated soldier." Veltar watched Tae-hyun put away the pictures and return to cleaning his rifle. The human worked with careful attention, checking every part of the weapon. He hummed a quiet tune while he worked. It struck Veltar as strange behavior for a warrior, preparing for battle. They continued to Veltar's quarters. The room was small but clean, with a bed designed for his larger frame and different sleeping position. A desk held data pads with information about their mission. "We are heading to the Zerion system," Soo-Jin explained. "The Void Reapers have been spotted in that area. 3 planets with civilian populations need evacuation." Veltar knew about the Void Reapers. They were unlike other enemies the galaxy had faced. Most species fought for territory, resources, or survival. The Reapers seemed to fight for the joy of causing pain. They took no prisoners and left no survivors. Many worlds had simply been abandoned when the Reapers appeared. "Why do humans volunteer for this mission?" Veltar asked. "Most species choose to evacuate their own people and avoid the Reapers." Soo-Jin was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was different. Flatter. "Someone has to make a stand, Commander. If we keep running, eventually there will be nowhere left to run to." After she left, Veltar reviewed the mission files. The Reapers had destroyed 17 worlds in the past year. The reports described horrible scenes. Entire cities turned into monuments to suffering. The creatures seemed to take pleasure in creative cruelty. They would keep populations alive just to experiment with new ways to cause pain. Most disturbing were the psychological profiles of survivors from Reaper attacks. The few beings who had escaped reported that the Reapers did not just kill. They studied their victims' reactions to fear and pain. They learned what each species found most terrifying, and used that knowledge to refine their methods. Veltar had fought many enemies, but the reports about Reapers made his scales crawl with unease. What kind of creature found joy in the suffering of others? Over the next few days, he observed the human crew more closely. They maintained their routines, training exercises, equipment maintenance, meal times. But there were odd details that bothered him. During combat training, the humans practiced techniques that seemed unnecessarily violent. Sergeant Minsu taught hand-to-hand fighting methods that were designed to cause maximum pain, not just to disable an enemy. When Veltar asked about this, Minsu shrugged. Against most enemies, a quick kill is best, the sergeant said. But some enemies need to understand that attacking you will cost them more than they want to pay. Lieutenant So Young ran what she called mental preparation sessions with the troops. Veltar attended one of these meetings. Instead of the battle strategy discussions he expected, the humans talked about managing fear and staying focused when facing horrible sights. They discussed techniques for staying calm when watching others suffer. Why do you need special training for this? Veltar asked. In battle, you focus on defeating the enemy. Commander, So Young replied, some battles are not just about winning. They are about staying human while you do what needs to be done. That phrase stuck with Veltar. Staying human. What did that mean? He noticed other strange things. The humans wrote letters to their families regularly, but they also updated their wills and medical directives just as often. They talked about their loved ones with deep emotion, then discussed battle tactics with cold logic. It was like they carried two different personalities inside them. One evening, Veltar found Corporal Tae-hyun in the observation lounge, looking out at the stars. The young human was cleaning his rifle again, still humming that same quiet tune. You maintain your weapon very carefully, Veltar observed. Tae-hyun looked up. Yes, sir. My father taught me that a warrior's weapon is part of his soul. Take care of it, and it will take care of you. Your father was a soldier? He was. Tae-hyun's expression grew distant. He fought in the Kepler 442b campaign. Came back different, my mother said. Took him years to learn how to be gentle again. What happened on Kepler 442b? Tae-hyun was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, the enemy there took hostages, civilians, used them as shields and other things. My father's unit had to make some hard choices to save as many people as they could. I see. That must have been difficult. My father told me something before I enlisted, Tae-hyun continued. He said the hardest part of being a soldier is not learning how to kill. It is learning how to live with what you have to do, and remembering why you chose to do it. Veltar did not fully understand, but he sensed something important in the young human's words. 3 weeks into their journey, Captain Hyunwoo called all senior staff to a briefing. The latest intelligence reports showed Reaper forces moving faster than expected. They would reach Zerion Prime within days, not weeks. We will arrive just as the evacuation begins, Hyunwoo announced. Our job is to buy time for the civilian transports to load and escape. What about Reaper psychological warfare? Asked Lieutenant So Young. Intelligence reports say they use fear as a weapon. We follow Protocol 7, Hyunwoo replied simply. Veltar saw several humans nod, but no one explained what Protocol 7 meant. When he asked later, Major Sujin just said, standard operating procedure for this type of mission, Commander. That night, Veltar noticed the change. The casual conversations became quieter. The laughter stopped. The humans still performed their duties, but something was different in their eyes. They looked like soldiers preparing for a terrible battle. But, more than that, they looked like people preparing to become something else. As their ship approached the Zerion system, Veltar felt a growing sense of unease. He had observed these humans for weeks, and he still did not understand them. They seemed too soft for war, yet they volunteered for the most dangerous missions. They loved their families deeply, yet they trained for extreme violence. They talked about staying human, yet they seemed to be preparing for the opposite. Soon he would see what humans really were in battle. He just hoped he was ready for the truth. The journey to Zerion continued for another week. Veltar used this time to learn more about the humans around him. What he discovered made him more confused, not less. Every morning, Private Dong-wook would sit in the mess hall and read messages from his wife. The young human would smile at pictures of his baby daughter and share the news with anyone who would listen. His daughter had learned a new word. His wife had planted a garden. Simple things that seemed to bring him great joy. But in the afternoons, Dong-wook would practice with his squad in the combat simulator. Veltar watched him learn to use explosives, to set traps, to kill efficiently and quietly. The same hands that touched his daughter's picture so gently learned to break necks and plant charges. "It is strange," Veltar said to Major Soo-jin one day. "Your people seem to care deeply about life, yet you train so hard to take it." Soo-jin looked at him with those distant eyes he had noticed in other humans. "Commander, caring about life is exactly why we learn to take it. The universe has things in it that want to destroy everything good. Someone has to stand against that." "But why humans? Your species is new to the galaxy. You have no special weapons, no natural advantages. Why not leave this to older, stronger races?" Soo-jin was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that stayed with Veltar for days. "Because, Commander, sometimes the universe needs someone who understands monsters." That evening, Veltar attended another of Lieutenant So-young's mental preparation sessions. This time, the discussion was different. The humans talked about something called compartmentalization. "Remember," So-young told the group, "what we do in battle stays in battle. When the mission is over, you put it away. You do not bring it home to your families. You do not carry it into peaceful moments." "But how do you forget?" asked a young private named Jin-ho. "You do not forget," replied Sergeant Min-soo. "You accept. You did what needed to be done to protect innocent people. You carry that knowledge, but you do not let it poison the good parts of your life." Veltar raised his hand. "Why do you need this training? Most warriors simply fight when ordered and rest when the battle is over." The room went very quiet. Finally, So-young spoke. "Commander, most warriors fight against enemies who follow rules. Enemies who want something: territory, resources, power. The Reapers are different. They want to cause suffering for its own sake. Fighting them requires special methods." "What kind of special methods?" No one answered directly. Instead, Medic Ye-jin spoke up. "Commander, have you ever had to choose between saving one person or saving 10 people?" "Yes, in battle situations." "Have you ever had to choose between saving someone quickly or saving someone slowly, but making sure the enemy learns that taking hostages will cost them more than they can bear?" Veltar felt his scales prickle with unease. "That is a difficult question." "Yes," Ye-jin said softly, "it is." Later that night, Veltar found Sergeant Min-soo in the training room working out alone. The human was lifting weights that seemed too heavy for his frame, but he moved them with steady determination. "Sergeant, may I ask you something?" "Of course, Commander." "What happened on Proxima Centauri? I saw it mentioned in some service records." Min-soo set down the weights and was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was flat, emotionless. "Reapers took a colony world. 3 million civilians. We arrived too late to stop the initial attack, but we could still save some of them." "How many did you save?" "All of them." Min-soo picked up the weights again. "Every single person on that world." "That is impressive. How did you manage such a complete rescue?" Min-soo looked at Veltar with eyes that seemed much older than his face. "We gave the Reapers something else to think about, Commander. Something that made them forget about torturing civilians. What could distract them from their cruelty? Meeting creatures who were better at it than they were." The words hit Veltar like a physical blow. He stared at Min-soo, trying to understand what the human had just said. "Sergeant, are you saying that you—" "I am saying that we saved 3 million innocent people," Min-soo cut him off. "Whatever we had to become to do that, it was worth it." Veltar left the training room feeling deeply unsettled. He had fought many battles, seen many terrible things, But there was something about the humans that he could not grasp. They spoke of love and family with genuine warmth, but underneath that warmth was something cold and vast. The next day, Captain Hyunwoo called Veltar to his office. The captain's quarters were simple, with pictures of Earth and what looked like family members, but on his desk were reports and files that made Veltar's blood run cold. "Commander, I want to show you something," Hyunwoo said. "These are intelligence reports about Reaper tactics. I think you should understand what we are facing." The files contained video footage from Reaper attacks. Veltar had seen war before, but this was different. The Reapers did not simply kill their enemies. They studied them. They experimented. They learned exactly what each species feared most, then used that knowledge to create new forms of terror. One report showed a Kethran colony. The Reapers had discovered that Kethran parents would do anything to protect their young, so they captured the children and used them to make the adults perform horrific acts against each other. Another report documented a Zephyrian outpost. The Reapers learned that Zephyrians valued speed and freedom above all else, so they broke. They captured Zephyrians' legs and forced them to crawl while carrying messages between torture chambers. "This is monstrous," Veltar whispered. "Yes," Hyunwoo agreed. "It is. And most species who encounter this simply run. They evacuate their worlds and hope the Reapers move on to easier targets." "That is understandable. Who would want to face such cruelty?" Hyunwoo leaned back in his chair. "Commander, do you know what humans did when we first encountered Reapers?" "No." "We studied them back." The simple words made Veltar feel cold. "What do you mean?" "We captured some of their scouts. We learned how they thought, how they operated, what motivated them. We studied their psychology the same way they studied their victims." "And what did you learn?" Hyunwoo's expression was completely calm, but his eyes were like looking into deep space. "We learned that they are predators who have never met a superior predator. They cause suffering because they have never experienced true fear themselves. They are bullies who have never been bullied." "So what did you do with this knowledge?" "We taught them what it feels like to be prey." Veltar felt his breathing become difficult. "Captain, what exactly did your people do?" "We gave them a taste of their own medicine, Commander. We showed them what it was like to be on the receiving end of creative cruelty. We made them understand that attacking human-protected worlds would cost them more than they were willing to pay." "You became like them?" "No," Hyunwoo said firmly. "We became what was necessary to stop them. There is a difference." "What difference?" "We can stop. They cannot." That night, Veltar lay in his quarters, staring at the ceiling. He thought about the humans around him. Corporal Tae-hyun, who smiled at pictures of his daughter and hummed gentle songs while learning to kill silently. Private Dong-wook, who wrote love letters to his wife and practiced making bombs. Medic Ye-jin, who could heal wounds and apparently knew how to cause them in very specific ways. They were not like any warriors he had known. Other species fought with honor, or from necessity, or for glory. But humans seemed to fight from a place of calculated darkness. They loved deeply and killed efficiently. They protected the innocent and studied cruelty. As their ship approached Zerion Prime, Veltar noticed more changes in the human crew. The casual conversation stopped almost completely. The smiles became rare. The humans moved with a different kind of purpose now, like predators preparing to hunt. But most disturbing of all, they seemed to be preparing not just for battle, but for transformation, as if they were about to become something else entirely. "Commander," Major Soo-jin said, approaching his quarters, "we will arrive at Zerion Prime in 6 hours. Captain Hyunwoo requests your presence at the final briefing." "Of course, Major." She turned to leave, then stopped. "Commander, I want you to know something. What you are about to see, this is not who we are. This is what we become when we have no other choice." "I do not understand the difference." Soo-jin looked at him with something that might have been pity. "You will, Commander. I hope you can live with the understanding." As Veltar prepared for the briefing, he realized that his mission had changed. He was no longer just observing human combat effectiveness. He was about to witness something that would challenge everything he thought he knew about the nature of good and evil. The real horror was not what the Reapers might do to them. The real horror was what the humans were prepared to do back. The final briefing took place in the ship's main conference room. Every human officer was present along with Veltar. The atmosphere was different now. Gone were the casual conversations and gentle smiles. The humans sat with perfect posture, their faces blank, their eyes focused on Captain Hyunwoo. Current situation, the captain began, his voice crisp and professional. Zerion Prime has a population of 4 million civilians. Evacuation ships are already loading refugees at 3 major spaceports. Our job is to provide security and buy time. A holographic display showed the planet's surface. 3 cities were highlighted in blue, showing evacuation zones. Red markers indicated Reaper scout positions. Intelligence reports suggest the main Reaper force will arrive in 18 hours, Major Sujin added. However, advanced scouts are already on the surface. They have taken positions around the evacuation sites. What is their objective? Veltar asked. Lieutenant So-young answered, her voice completely flat. The scouts are there to gather intelligence on evacuation procedures and civilian behavior patterns. They will study how the refugees react to fear, then report back to the main force. Why would they need this information? So the main force can design the most effective psychological attacks, Captain Hyunwoo replied. The Reapers do not just want to capture or kill the civilians. They want to maximize their suffering first. Veltar felt his scales crawl. Then we must eliminate the scouts quickly before they can gather this intelligence. The humans exchanged glances. There was something in their expressions that made Veltar uneasy. Commander, Sergeant Minsu said carefully, the scouts are not just watching. They have already taken hostages. Civilians who were caught outside the evacuation zones. Then we rescue the hostages and eliminate the scouts. It is not that simple, Medic Yejin said quietly. The scouts are using the hostages to bait rescue attempts. They want to capture soldiers so they can study military psychology as well as civilian reactions. Veltar understood the tactical problem but not the solution. So what do you propose? Captain Hyunwoo stood up straighter. His voice became completely emotionless. We implement Protocol 7. Every human in the room nodded. Veltar noticed that some of them looked sad, but none of them looked surprised or hesitant. What is Protocol 7? Veltar demanded. Major Sujin looked at him for a long moment. Commander, Protocol 7 is a psychological warfare doctrine developed specifically for fighting Reapers. The goal is to make them stop thinking about their prisoners and start thinking about their own survival. How do you accomplish this? By becoming something they fear more than they enjoy causing fear in others. Veltar did not understand, but he could sense that something terrible was about to happen. The humans landed on Zerion Prime in small shuttles, spreading out to cover all 3 evacuation zones. Veltar accompanied Captain Hyunwoo's team to the largest city, where 2 million refugees were waiting for transport. The scene was heartbreaking. Families huddled together with whatever possessions they could carry. Children cried while adults tried to comfort them. The evacuation ships could only take a few thousand people at a time, so the majority had to wait their turn while knowing that monsters were coming for them. Veltar had seen refugee camps before, but something about this one felt different. The civilians were not just afraid. They were terrified in a specific way that he had never witnessed. They moved like prey animals that knew predators were watching them. The scouts are in position around the camp perimeter, reported Corporal Taehyun. His voice was completely different now. All emotion had been drained from it. They have hostages in 3 locations. How many hostages? Captain Hyunwoo asked. 37 civilians total. Men, women, and children. Veltar expected the captain to order immediate rescue operations. Instead, Hyunwoo nodded calmly and said, Begin Phase 1. What is Phase 1? Veltar asked. Reconnaissance, replied Major Sujin. But the way she said it made Veltar suspect it was something more. Over the next hour, Veltar watched the humans work. They moved through the refugee camp with professional efficiency, helping civilians board transport ships and maintaining security. But he noticed other activities that confused him. Private Dong Wook was collecting information about the hostages, not just their locations, but detailed personal information. Names, ages, families, fears. Lieutenant So Young was interviewing refugees who had escaped from the scouts, asking very specific questions about Reaper behavior and psychology. Most disturbing, Sergeant Min-Soo was examining Reaper equipment that had been left behind. Not to understand their technology, but to understand their methods of causing pain. "Why do you need this information?" Veltar asked Major Sujin. "Know your enemy, Commander," she replied. But her eyes were cold and distant. As the day progressed, Veltar began to notice changes in the humans around him. The transformation was subtle at first. Conversations became shorter and more focused. Facial expressions became blank. Even their body language changed, becoming more predatory. But the most disturbing change was in their eyes. The warmth and humanity that Veltar had observed during the journey was slowly fading, replaced by something calculating and cold. The first real shock came when they encountered their first Reaper scout. The creature had taken position in an abandoned building on the edge of the refugee camp. It was holding a family of 4 hostage, 2 adults and 2 small children. The scout had positioned itself so that any rescue attempt would require the attackers to cross open ground under its weapons. Veltar expected the humans to devise a tactical plan to neutralize the threat and rescue the hostages. Instead, Private Jinho simply walked into the open ground and sat down. "What are you doing?" Veltar hissed into his communicator. "Making contact," Jinho replied calmly. The Reaper scout called out in its harsh, grating language. Veltar's translator interpreted, "Approach further and the young ones die first." Jinho called back, his voice completely steady. "Go ahead. Kill them." Veltar felt his blood freeze. Even the Reaper seemed surprised by the response. "You do not care about the hostages?" the Reaper asked. "I care about them very much," Jinho replied, still sitting calmly in the open. "That is why I want you to kill them quickly before my friends arrive." "What?" "My friends are coming to visit you. They will be here very soon. If you kill the hostages now, their deaths will be quick and painless. If you wait for my friends, the hostages will have to watch what happens to you. That would be traumatic. For them." Veltar could not believe what he was hearing. The Reaper seemed equally confused. "You threaten me?" the scout asked. "No," Jinho said in the same calm tone. "I am trying to save those children from nightmares. You should kill them now, while you still have the chance to be merciful." There was a long silence. Then the Reaper made a mistake. Instead of killing the hostages, it started to ask Jinho what he meant. That was when Veltar learned what the humans meant by Phase 1. The attack came from 3 directions simultaneously. But it was not a rescue operation. The humans moved like they were hunting the most dangerous game in the galaxy. They did not just neutralize the Reaper, they captured it. The hostages were freed unharmed, but Veltar noticed that the humans immediately moved them away from the area. They did not want the civilians to see what happened next. "Commander," Major Sujin said quietly, "you may want to observe from a distance." "Why?" "Because what happens now is not something most beings should witness." But Veltar was a warrior. He had seen interrogations before. He decided to watch. That was his first mistake. The captured Reaper was placed in a secure area behind the building. Captain Hyunwoo approached it with the same calm professionalism he had shown during their journey. "You have been studying our civilians," the captain said conversationally. "Learning their fears, their weaknesses, their psychology. That is very thorough of you." The Reaper hissed with hatred. "Your species will make interesting subjects. We will learn much from your suffering." "I am sure you would," Hyunwoo agreed pleasantly. "But first, we are going to learn from yours." What happened next burned itself into Veltar's memory forever. The humans did not torture the Reaper out of anger or revenge. They studied it with the same methodical care they had shown when maintaining their equipment or writing letters home. They learned what the Reaper feared. They discovered what caused it pain, what made it panic, what broke its concentration. They mapped its psychology with scientific precision, and then they used that knowledge. But the most horrifying part was not what they did to the Reaper. The most horrifying part was how they did it, with the same gentle efficiency they had shown when helping refugee children. With the same careful attention to detail they used when cleaning their weapons, they broke the creature completely, learned everything it knew about Reaper operations, and then ended its suffering with clinical precision. When it was over, Captain Hyunwoo looked exactly the same as he had before. Calm, professional, slightly distant, as if nothing unusual had happened. Phase 1 complete, he reported into his communicator. Moving to Phase 2. Veltar realized with growing horror that there were more phases, and that he was about to learn what humans really were when they stopped pretending to be civilized. The main Reaper force arrived exactly when intelligence had predicted. Veltar watched from the command post as their ships descended through Zarian Prime's atmosphere like metal locusts. The evacuation was only half complete. 2 million civilians still waited for transport. "Sir," reported Corporal Taehyun, his voice completely emotionless now. "Reaper forces are deploying around all 3 evacuation sites. They are not attacking immediately." "Of course not," replied Captain Hyunwoo. "They want to set up their equipment first." Veltar had read the intelligence reports, but seeing it happen was different. The Reapers were not just invading. They were preparing to turn the entire evacuation into a psychological experiment. They set up broadcasting equipment to amplify screams. They positioned torture devices in full view of the refugee camps. They wanted the civilians to see exactly what was waiting for them. "Why do they waste time with this theater?" Veltar asked Major Sujin. "Why not simply attack?" Sujin watched the Reaper preparations through her scope. Her expression was completely blank. "Because fear is a weapon, Commander. If they can break the civilians psychologically before the physical attack, resistance becomes impossible. Then we must attack them before they can begin their psychological warfare." "No," Sujin said quietly. "We let them begin." "What? Why?" "Because Protocol 7 requires them to reveal their methods first. We need to understand exactly how they operate before we can turn their own tactics against them." Veltar felt sick. "You are going to let them torture civilians just to gather intelligence?" Major Sujin looked at him with eyes that seemed completely dead. "Commander, by the time we are finished, the Reapers will wish they had never learned what suffering means." The Reaper psychological attack began at sunset. They started broadcasting sounds across the evacuation sites, recordings of screams from their previous victories, descriptions of what they planned to do to the refugees, promises of prolonged agony for anyone who resisted. Veltar watched the effect on the civilian population. Parents held their children closer. Some people began crying. Others sat in stunned silence. The Reapers were achieving exactly what they wanted, breaking the spirits of their victims before the real attack began. But then Veltar noticed something strange. The humans were not affected by the psychological warfare at all. They moved through the terrified crowds with complete calm, continuing their evacuation duties as if nothing had changed. "Sir," Private Dongwook reported to Captain Hyunwoo, "the enemy has set up 17 torture stations around the perimeter. They are preparing to begin demonstration executions." "Excellent," Hyunwoo replied. "Signal all teams. Phase 2 begins now." Veltar expected to see the humans launch an attack. Instead, they began broadcasting their own sounds. At first, Veltar could not identify what he was hearing. It was not music or voices or battle cries. It was something else entirely. A mixture of sounds that seemed designed to create a specific emotional response. Then he realized what it was. The humans were broadcasting recordings of Reaper screams. Not the sounds their enemies made when attacking, but the sounds they made when they were afraid. "Where did you get these recordings?" Veltar asked Lieutenant So-young. "From our previous encounters," she replied without emotion. "We have been studying Reaper psychology for years. We know exactly what sounds they make when they experience fear, pain, and despair. The effect on the Reaper forces was immediate. Their own psychological broadcasts stopped as they tried to understand what they were hearing. Veltar could see confusion in their ranks. They had never encountered an enemy that understood their psychology well enough to turn it against them. But the humans were just getting started. "Sir," reported Sergeant Minsu, "enemy forces are requesting communication." "Put them through," Hyunwoo ordered. A harsh voice filled the command post, speaking in the guttural Reaper language. Veltar's translator interpreted, "Humans, you think your crude attempts at psychological warfare can affect us?" Captain Hyunwoo replied in perfect Reaper language, without using a translator. His pronunciation was exact, his grammar flawless. "We do not think anything, we know. We have studied you for years. We know your fears better than you do." There was a long pause. When the Reaper spoke again, there was something different in its voice. "You speak our language." "We speak many languages," Hyunwoo replied calmly, "including the language of pain. Would you like us to demonstrate? You threaten us? No, we educate you." That was when the real attack began, but it was not the kind of military assault Veltar expected. The humans moved through the Reaper positions like ghosts. They did not engage in direct combat. Instead, they captured individual Reapers and disappeared back into the shadows. Within an hour, a dozen enemy soldiers had simply vanished. The captured Reapers did not stay gone for long. The humans sent them back to their own lines but changed. They were not physically injured, but their minds had been broken in very specific ways. They gibbered about horrors beyond their understanding. They warned their fellows about enemies who knew secrets that should not exist. "What did you do to them?" Veltar asked Major Sujin. "We showed them what it feels like to be helpless," she replied without emotion. "Reapers are predators who have never been prey. They do not know how to handle true fear." More Reapers began disappearing. Each one that returned was in worse psychological condition than the last. The enemy forces started pulling back from their positions, no longer focused on tormenting civilians but on protecting themselves from an enemy they could not understand. "Sir," reported Corporal Taehyun, "enemy psychological warfare has ceased completely. They are now broadcasting warnings to their own forces." "What kind of warnings?" Captain Hyunwoo asked. "They are telling their soldiers to stay together, not to investigate strange sounds and to kill themselves rather than be captured alive." Veltar felt a chill run through his scales. The Reapers, creatures that specialized in psychological terror, were now terrified themselves. But the humans were not finished. Private Jin Ho approached the command post carrying a large case. "Sir, Phase 3 equipment is ready for deployment." "What is Phase 3? Veltar asked. Major Sujin looked at him with something that might have been pity. "Phase 3 is when we stop being subtle, Commander." The case contained devices that Veltar did not recognize. They looked like a combination of medical equipment and torture devices, designed with the same careful precision the humans applied to everything they built. "These are psychological amplifiers," Lieutenant So Young explained. "They take the fear responses we have recorded from captured Reapers and broadcast them directly into enemy nervous systems." "You are going to torture them with their own fear?" "No, Commander," So Young corrected. "We are going to teach them empathy. For the first time in their existence, they will understand what their victims feel." The devices were deployed around the Reaper positions. When they activated, the effect was immediate and devastating. The enemy forces began exhibiting the same behaviors they had spent centuries inflicting on others: panic, despair, uncontrollable terror. But the most disturbing part was not what the devices did to the Reapers. The most disturbing part was watching the humans operate them. They monitored the enemy's psychological breakdown with the same clinical detachment they had shown during equipment maintenance. They adjusted the settings to maximize effectiveness with the same careful attention they gave to helping refugee children. "Sir," reported Sergeant Minsu, "enemy forces are attempting to retreat." "Denied," Captain Hyunwoo replied immediately. "Implement containment protocols." Veltar watched in horror as the humans surrounded the Reaper forces, not to destroy them, but to trap them in their psychological torment. They wanted the enemy to experience prolonged terror, the same thing the Reapers had done to countless civilizations, Captain, Veltar said urgently. The civilians are safe now. The evacuation is nearly complete. You can end this. Hyunwoo looked at him with eyes that contained no warmth, no mercy, no humanity at all. Commander, this is not about the civilians anymore. This is about making sure the Reapers never want to encounter humans again. But you are torturing them. Yes, Hyunwoo agreed calmly. We are giving them a complete education in what they have done to others. By the time we are finished, they will understand exactly what their victims experienced. This is not justice. This is revenge. No, Commander, Major Sujin said quietly. Revenge would be doing this for our own satisfaction. We are doing this to protect every innocent being in the galaxy. When word spreads about what happens to creatures that attack human-protected worlds, others will think twice. Veltar realized with growing horror that the humans had planned this entire operation not just to save the civilians on Zerion Prime, but to send a message to every hostile force in the galaxy. They were not just winning a battle. They were establishing their reputation as something too dangerous to challenge. The psychological warfare continued through the night. By dawn, the Reaper forces were completely broken. They huddled in their positions, no longer capable of organized resistance. Some had gone catatonic, others begged for death. Sir, reported Lieutenant So Young, enemy psychological profile indicates complete educational success. They now possess full understanding of victim psychology. Excellent, Captain Hyunwoo replied. Begin Phase 4. What is Phase 4 began with an announcement broadcast across all Reaper frequencies. Captain Hyunwoo's voice was calm and professional, as if he were discussing weather reports instead of addressing broken enemies. Reaper forces, this is Captain Hyunwoo Park of the Human Defense Corps. Your education is now complete. You understand what your victims have experienced for centuries. You know what it feels like to be helpless, terrified, and hopeless. The response from the Reaper positions was silence. Not the silence of defiance, but the silence of creatures too broken to speak. However, Hyunwoo continued, your education is not finished. The final lesson is about choice. Veltar watched the human captain with growing unease. There was something in Hyunwoo's tone that suggested Phase 4 would be even worse than what had come before. You now have 3 options, the captain announced. Option 1. You can choose to continue your current behavior. You can maintain your aggressive posture and force us to complete your education. I promise you, the lessons will become much more detailed. Veltar could see movement in the Reaper positions. The enemy soldiers were stirring, responding to the humans' words despite their psychological trauma. Option 2. You can attempt to retreat. You can try to escape this system and report your experience to your superiors. We will allow this. In fact, we encourage it. We want the entire galaxy to know what happens when you attack innocent beings under human protection. Several Reaper commanders began signaling their intention to withdraw. But Captain Hyunwoo was not finished. Option 3, he said, his voice becoming softer but somehow more terrifying. You can choose to learn from this experience. You can decide to become something other than predators. You can choose to protect instead of destroy. The silence that followed was complete. Even Veltar found himself holding his breath. You have 1 hour to decide, Hyunwoo concluded. Choose wisely. Your next decision will determine whether you live as evolved beings or die as the monsters you were. When the broadcast ended, Veltar turned to Major Sujin. What does he mean by option 3? Sujin's expression was unreadable. Exactly what he said, Commander. We are offering them a chance to change. You would trust creatures like the Reapers to reform? Trust? Sujin shook her head. No, Commander. But we would give them the opportunity to prove they can be more than what they were. And if they choose option 1, if they continue to fight, Major Sujin looked at him with those cold, distant eyes, then they will learn what Phase 5 looks like. There is a Phase 5? Commander, Lieutenant So Young said quietly, There are as many phases as necessary. We do not stop until the lesson is completely understood. Over the next hour, Veltar watched the Reaper forces struggle with their decision. Some groups began preparing for withdrawal. Option 2. Others maintained their positions but showed no signs of aggression. They seemed paralyzed by the choice they had been given. But one group, the largest, began moving toward the human positions. Not retreating, not surrendering, but advancing with what looked like renewed purpose. "Sir," reported Sergeant Minsu, "enemy force approximately 300 strong is approaching our perimeter. Intent unclear." Captain Hyunwoo nodded calmly. "Prepare Phase 5 protocols." "What are Phase 5 protocols?" Veltar demanded. "The final lesson," Hyunwoo replied. "The one that ensures the enemy never forgets what they have learned." Veltar expected to see the humans prepare their most destructive weapons. Instead, they began setting up equipment he had never seen before. Devices that looked like a cross between medical scanners and communication arrays. "What is that equipment for?" "Memory recording," Lieutenant So Young explained. "We are going to preserve this experience in the enemy's minds permanently." "You mean brainwashing?" "No, Commander. Brainwashing would be forcing them to think differently. This is education. We are going to make sure they remember this lesson for the rest of their lives, and that they share it with every member of their species they ever encounter." The approaching Reaper force stopped just outside weapon range. Their leader, a massive creature covered in natural armor, called out in their harsh language, "Humans, we have decided. We choose to fight. We choose to die as warriors rather than live as cowards." Captain Hyunwoo responded without hesitation. "Very well. Your choice is noted and respected. Phase 5 authorized." What happened next defied everything Veltar thought he understood about warfare. The humans did not attack the Reapers. Instead, they surrounded them with the memory recording devices and began broadcasting something into their minds. Not pain, not fear, but knowledge. The Reapers began to experience the memories of every victim they had ever tortured. They felt what their prisoners had felt. They understood the terror of helpless beings watching their loved ones suffer. They experienced the despair of parents unable to protect their children. But more than that, they began to understand the consequences of their actions across the galaxy. They saw worlds turn to ash, civilizations destroyed, billions of lives ended in agony. They experienced not just individual suffering, but the vast scope of the damage they had caused. "Sir," reported Private Dongwook, "enemy neural patterns indicate complete comprehension. They understand the full impact of their historical actions. Continue the education," Captain Hyunwoo ordered. The memory broadcast intensified. Now the Reapers were experiencing not just the suffering they had caused, but the suffering they could have prevented. They saw what their victims' lives could have been, children who could have grown up, civilizations that could have flourished, discoveries that could have benefited the galaxy. One by one, the Reaper warriors began to collapse, not from pain or fear, but from the overwhelming weight of understanding what they had destroyed. "Sir," Lieutenant So Young reported, "enemy psychological profiles indicate fundamental personality restructuring. Their core behavioral patterns are changing." "Good," Hyunwoo replied. "Continue until the transformation is complete." Veltar watched in fascination and horror as the Reaper soldiers were literally transformed into different beings. Their capacity for cruelty was not destroyed. It was redirected. They began to understand that their strength could be used to protect instead of destroy. "Captain," Veltar said urgently, "you are changing their fundamental nature. You are altering what they are at the most basic level." "Yes," Hyunwoo agreed calmly. "We are offering them the chance to become something better than they were." "But, is this not a form of execution? You are killing who they were." Captain Hyunwoo looked at him with something that might have been sadness. "Commander, every sentient being has the capacity for choice. These creatures chose to be monsters for centuries. Now we are showing them how to choose differently. And if they reject the lesson, then they will die as monsters and the galaxy will be safer without them." The memory broadcast continued for hours, Veltar watched as proud, vicious predators were transformed into something entirely different. When the process was complete, the Reapers no longer looked like the same species. They moved differently, spoke differently, even seemed to think differently. Their leader approached the human positions, but not as an enemy. He moved like a creature seeking redemption. "Humans," the Reaper said in halting, accented standard Galactic. "We understand now. We see what we were, what we did. We want to make amends." Captain Hyunwoo stepped forward. His voice was gentle now, almost kind. "Making amends will take time. It will require you to spend the rest of your lives protecting the innocent instead of harming them." "We will do this," the Reaper leader replied. "We will guard those who cannot guard themselves. We will fight those who prey upon the weak." "Good," Hyunwoo said. "But understand, we will be watching. If you ever return to your old ways, if you ever again choose to cause unnecessary suffering, we will find you. And the next lesson will be permanent." The transformed Reapers left Zarian Prime that day, but not as conquerors. They left as protectors, seeking ways to undo the damage they had caused across the galaxy. As Veltar watched their ships depart, he realized he was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. The humans had not just defeated their enemies, they had transformed them into allies. "Captain," he said quietly, "what you did today, I have never seen anything like it." Hyunwoo nodded. "And you never will again, Commander. This method only works on species that retain some capacity for empathy. Most enemies can be reasoned with, negotiated with, or defeated through conventional means. Then why develop such extreme measures?" Captain Hyunwoo looked out at the departing Reaper ships. "Because sometimes, Commander, the universe produces true monsters. When that happens, someone has to be prepared to become a bigger monster to stop them." "And then?" "And then," Hyunwoo said softly, "we have to remember how to become human again." For the first time since the battle began, Veltar saw something like normal emotion return to the captain's eyes. The transformation was subtle but unmistakable. The cold, calculating predator was fading, replaced by the caring, thoughtful being Veltar had known during their journey. But now Veltar understood that both versions were equally real, equally human, and that terrified him more than anything. 3 days after the battle, Veltar stood in the observation lounge of the human ship, watching Zarian Prime grow smaller in the distance. The evacuation had been completed successfully. 4 million civilians were safe. The Reaper threat, too. This system had been eliminated permanently. But Veltar felt no sense of victory. Instead, he felt deeply unsettled by what he had witnessed. The transformation in the humans had been immediate and complete. Within hours of the last Reaper ship departing, every human soldier had returned to their pre-battle behavior. They laughed at jokes again, they shared pictures of their families. They wrote gentle letters to their loved ones. Corporal Taehyun was humming his quiet tune while cleaning his rifle. Private Dongwook was reading messages from his wife and smiling at pictures of his daughter. Medic Yejin was tending to minor injuries with the same gentle hands that had helped extract psychological profiles from enemy prisoners. It was as if the cold, calculating creatures who had systematically broken an entire enemy force had never existed. "Commander," a voice said behind him. Veltar turned to see Major Sujin approaching. Her expression was warm and friendly, nothing like the emotionless predator she had been during the battle. "Major," Veltar replied carefully, "I was just observing your crew." "They are good people," Sujin said, sitting down beside him. "The best humanity has to offer." "Are they?" Veltar asked. "After what I witnessed on Zarian Prime, I am no longer certain what humanity has to offer." Sujin was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was thoughtful, almost sad. "Commander, may I ask you something?" "Of course. In your years of military service, have you ever encountered an enemy that could not be reasoned with? A foe that took pleasure in causing suffering for its own sake?" Veltar considered the question. "Yes, but rarely. How did you deal with such enemies? We defeated them in battle, then either accepted their surrender or eliminated them if they would not yield. And if those enemies continued to attack innocent civilians even after military defeat, if they could not be deterred, could not be negotiated with, could not be contained. Veltar was beginning to understand where this conversation was leading. We would do whatever was necessary to protect the innocent. Yes, Sujin agreed softly. You would do whatever was necessary. But Commander, most species have limits to what they consider necessary. There are lines they will not cross, methods they will not use, sacrifices they will not make. And humans do not have such limits? Oh, we have limits, Sujin corrected. But our limits are different. Most species limit their methods, we limit our targets. I do not understand the distinction. Sujin looked out at the stars. Commander, every human you met on this ship is capable of becoming exactly as monstrous as necessary to protect innocent life. We can match any enemy's cruelty, exceed any foe's ruthlessness, surpass any threat's capacity for violence. That is what terrifies me, Veltar admitted. Good, Sujin said quietly. It should terrify you. It terrifies us too. Then why develop such capabilities? Because someone has to be the final line of defense, Commander. Someone has to be prepared. To walk through hell to protect heaven. They sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, Veltar asked the question that had been haunting him since the battle. Major, how do you live with what you are capable of? Sujin smiled, but it was a sad expression. By choosing not to be that thing unless we have no other choice. Every human on this ship could become a monster tomorrow. But we choose to be protectors instead. How can you trust yourselves to make that choice consistently? Because we understand the cost of failing to make it, Sujin replied. We know what happens when good people fail to act against evil. We have studied history, Commander. We know what happens when those with the capacity to protect refuse to use it. Captain Hyunwoo joined them in the observation lounge. He looked tired but peaceful, like a man who had completed a difficult but necessary task. Commander Veltar, he said, sitting down across from them. I imagine you will have quite a report to file with the Federation. Yes, Veltar agreed, though I am not certain how to describe what I witnessed. May I offer a suggestion? Please, Captain. Hyunwoo leaned forward. Tell them that humans are effective allies against existential threats. Tell them that we can be trusted to protect innocent life against any enemy, regardless of that enemy's capabilities or methods. And what should I not tell them? Tell them everything, Commander. The Federation should understand exactly what they are allying themselves with. Are you not concerned that they might fear humanity too much to accept you as partners? Hyunwoo exchanged a glance with Major Sujin. Commander, fear is not necessarily a negative emotion. Healthy fear leads to respect, caution, and wise decision-making. And unhealthy fear leads to the kind of behavior we had to correct in the Reapers. Veltar spent the next several days writing his report. It was the most difficult document he had ever composed. How could he explain to the Federation Council that humanity's greatest asset was also their most terrifying characteristic? How could he describe beings who could love deeply and kill efficiently, who could show infinite compassion and limitless cruelty, who could protect the innocent by becoming exactly as monstrous as necessary? In the end, he settled on simple truth. Recommendation: immediate approval for full human integration into Federation military operations with the following classifications. Level 1. Human forces may be deployed for standard military operations, peacekeeping missions, and defensive actions against conventional enemies. Level 2. Human forces may be deployed against unconventional threats that cannot be defeated through standard military doctrine. Level 3. Human forces may be deployed against existential threats to galactic civilization under the following conditions. No other species volunteers for the mission, conventional methods have failed, and the threat cannot be contained through normal means. Warning: under no circumstances should Level 3 deployments be authorized unless all other options have been exhausted. Human capabilities at this level exceed standard military doctrine and may cause psychological trauma to allied observers. Personal note: I have observed human forces in combat against an enemy that specializes in psychological warfare and systematic cruelty. The humans did not just defeat this enemy, they transformed them into protectors of innocent life. This achievement required methods that challenge conventional understanding of military ethics. However, I must also note that every human involved in this operation returned to normal, peaceful behavior immediately after the mission concluded. They show genuine care for their families, respect for innocent life, and commitment to protecting those who cannot protect themselves. Conclusion: humanity possesses capabilities that make them ideal guardians for galactic civilization, precisely because they understand the true cost of that responsibility. They become monsters so others do not have to. They walk through darkness so others can remain in the light. The real horror I witnessed was not what humans can do to their enemies. The real horror was realizing that the galaxy's best protectors are also its most dangerous predators, choosing every day to be heroes instead of villains. Recommendation stands. Full integration approved. May the Federation never have cause to see what I have seen, but may they always have access to those willing to see it in their place. Veltar sealed the report and sent it to Federation Command. Then he returned to the observation lounge where several humans were gathered around a table, sharing pictures of home and talking about their plans for shore leave. Corporal Tae Hyun was showing everyone a new picture of his daughter. She had learned to say daddy. Private Dong Wook was reading a letter from his wife about their garden blooming. Medic Yejin was discussing her plans to visit her elderly parents. They looked so normal, so peaceful, so human. And now Veltar understood that this was exactly what made them so terrifying. They could become monsters by choice, and return to being angels by the same choice. The universe's greatest guardians were also its most dangerous inhabitants, and they had chosen to protect rather than destroy. Veltar just hoped they would always continue to make that choice. As their ship traveled through space toward their next assignment, he realized he was no longer afraid of the humans around him. He was afraid for anyone foolish enough to threaten innocent life while humans were watching. Because he had learned what humans became when they decided that evil would not be tolerated, and he had seen them choose to become human again when the mission was over. That choice, he now understood, was what separated heroes from monsters. And it was what made humanity the most terrifying ally and the most necessary guardian the galaxy had ever known.